Yeah. Just started to get dark all of a sudden. So, oh, there was a rat.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep. Loud and clear.
Good. That's like what we want to see. So welcome everyone to the December board meeting and the final board meeting for the year. So we'll start off with attendance. So there's Martin, Grant, Bill Corey, Owen Pendlebury, and myself from the board. Vandana and Jubin are currently absent. The first point of the meeting is to go through and approve the meeting minutes for the November board meeting. Are there any issues to discuss with regards to this meeting? Can I raise a second to approve it?
Second.
Okay, thank you. So go for a vote. Martin?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Owen?
Yes.
And that's a yes from myself. Okay, and then on to the next point of the meeting, which is the reports. So Andrew,
It's a special board meeting minutes. You've got to do those too.
That's further down the line.
No, it's immediately below the minutes that you just approved.
Okay. So can I have a vote for, can I have a second with regards to the special boards meeting minutes?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Martin,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Owen,
Yes.
and that's a yes for myself as well. Okay, Barn, next up, Andrew, would you like to take on the reports?
Yep, sure. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Okay. Again, we're experimenting with a better way of presenting the reports to you. So what we'd like to do is get feedback on this from the board about what you'd like to see improved. This month, I've asked the events team to help out with an improved way of looking at events. Hopefully that'll give you some clarity on what's happening and everything along those lines. So without further ado, here we go. We are still very good in both GuideStar and Charity Navigator. Operating reserves, we're at 13. Well, it's actually for December. Why is this graph not updated? It should be 13.7 months. Give me one tick. Okay, for some reason, this version is not updating, but it should be 13.7. Okay. Okay, there's something wrong. I will bring up the slides, sorry, the sheets with the actual data so you can see the real thing. For some reason, it's reverted to the data from last month.
Perhaps just refresh the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I tried. For some reason, this is also reverted.
Let's go to December in it.
Okay, what I might do is with the, it's going to take time. This is very unusual because I definitely 100% changed this yesterday to include. Well, anyway, here we go. Those are the correct numbers that I did change, which are not reflected in the actual slides at the moment for whatever reason. So these are the numbers. Tom will take you through the details. We are at 1.475 million compared to 1.211 at the beginning of the year. That's actually an impressive increase in our balance and representative of all the hard work that the team has done. So let me just go back here. Tom will take you through the actual thing. We've done really well in individual members. We are now at 5463. That's up 102 from last month. That's 1,463 more than the 2021 goal. So we'll have to stretch a little bit more and annualize that 64.5% annual growth rate in membership. So all of the reforms that we've done, all of the hard work that the team has put in has actually led to quite a jump in membership. In addition, we've actually done quite a few membership drives, and we're going to continue to do that. For the first time in our history, membership has actually paid for our costs in the membership area and is helping fund chapter expenses. So that's a really good thing, and we want that to continue. And so this is where we're going with the AppSec, the events reporting. These are the events that we're going to be putting on for next year from a global perspective. There are individual slides. I don't propose to go over the individual slides unless you want to. The Asia Pac one is still, like, we were discussing it yesterday in the finance meeting, so the team hasn't even had time to plan it out yet. So that's why the little TBD here. Also, there's the Development Summit that Vandana is interested in running late next year in India. We will be participating in that, but there's also potentially a project summit that may go ahead as well. As you can see, we're looking at around, at the moment, between these two events, approximately 345, maybe $340,000 in profit, just rounded up to 350. We're hoping to be able to increase that. Events this year brought in $500,000, so we do need to keep a very close eye on our other forms of fundraising, so that we don't ever get stuck in the rabbit hole again of events being everything, and when events stop being functional as an income source, we're in terrible trouble. So we do need to do more fundraising. It'll be a huge focus for the board for next year. We do need to get more corporate memberships. We do need to get more sponsors. We do need to get more individual members. And of course, we need to actually get grants. Grants will help us drive a lot of the activity and projects, but also help fund the organization as well. We do have a number of AppSec Day events that have been approved or on the books. Obviously, Benelux needs to be shifted, but it's been approved. We don't know when it's going to be going ahead. There will be more detail here in future months, but roughly we're looking at Snowfrog pulling in around $20,000, of which 80%, if that comes out to be true, will be shared with this Snowfrog team. Let me just go back to the actual thing here. And not the minutes, not that. Here. That's the regional policy. I just really want to thank Owen and Sharif for their service over the last 4 years. Both of them have been chair during their terms, and we've done amazing things during those terms. And so realistically, we wouldn't be here without them. So thank you so much for your service, and I really wish you all the best, and hope you might consider joining either events, the compliance committee, or Sharif, I know you're interested in projects, so please stay involved after your term is finished. I want to thank all of my staff for all of the hard work they've done this year, and virtual as well. I think the fact that we've ended this year not only making a profit when we projected a loss is testament to all of the hard work, particularly with Kelly, who was running the events and corporate membership and all of the other things as well for the majority of the year until Lauren came aboard. And so, as I said, I think we've had a huge year. We've done really well, and I'm not going to let up on the gas. We need to keep on going. So thank you to my entire team. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom.
I don't think you're going to get away with passing by without us thanking you as well, Andrew. So you've done a tremendous amount of good work. You've managed to bring in quite a lot of goodwill within the community, and you were fantastic in steering the ship to the point where for the last couple of board meetings, there were limited motions, mainly because of the amount of work that we had done prior, and also because we were in lock and step with the executive team with the foundation. So thank you also so much for the amount of progress that you've managed to deliver and your leadership for the
Thank you.
foundation.
Thank you for your over the time I was chair, and even this year, I guess, and for prior stuff as well. So just as we're leaving and all that kind of stuff. I suppose we have to say our thank yous now.
Okay, thank you. No worries. I appreciate it.
Well, I'll keep that going since I've been around for 8 years with you all through a number of different executive directors. And I do have to say that, Andrew, you've done some phenomenal work. It shows in the membership and the financials and how you've kept the team together. I also did want to thank Owen and Sharif for all their help over the last 4 years. You guys have been fantastic. And again, hopefully we'll see you around the foundation, as well as welcoming in the new board members. So with that, I'm going to take you quickly through the financials because I changed it a little bit this month. I wrote an actual narrative that we're going to continue to keep up. So hopefully you all have had a chance to review that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. But this is a little more in line with how we're growing. So it tells a little bit more of a story. The couple of things that I do want to highlight is Andrew's correct. If you looked at our bank balance as of November 30th, 2020, it was $1,269,000, and today it's $1,475,000. So it's up $206,000. Part of that is, all of the success we've had with the events this year. Part of it is driven by the forgiveness of the PPP loan, which was fantastic for the organization. We got to keep it without having to pay it back. I will take you quickly through the actual financial statements. As you can see, this is our balance sheet, our statement of financial position at a point in time. There's our bank balance. We have about $360,000 worth of receivables. I can tell you, looking at it yesterday, it was down to about $257,000. So the money is coming in. This is our due from with the European entity, which when we make the change next year, that will be resolved and go away. We also have some prepaids. So again, this is what we talked about in the meeting. There's about $19,000 that we prepaid for Dublin and a few other of the events, which I have to close out at the end of the year. In our payables, we have about $79,000 in payables that have been paid out in December. This is the number that is interesting to me. This is deferred revenue. So this is the engagement and the response to events that we will hopefully be having going forward. Last year at this time, it was 121,000. So there's a lot to go through here. I've got to close out the US event. So most of that will probably be recognized next month. And as you can see, our equity in the organization is over $1 million, which is fantastic. A little bit of equity in the European entity and just under $1.1 million in equity for OWASP as a whole. I can tell you I have a lot of other clients that are not reporting the results that we are here. So it's a testament to everybody's hard work this year. I'll stop there for a minute and see if anybody has any questions.
I'd want to say that thank you for the reporting. Both the executive report and the financial report looks really good. I think the feedback that I have, Andrew, is on the events. You might want to have in the summary update a comment next to the status. So you have on track, off track, and so forth. You might want to put a comment there that basically needs board's attention or just needs board's notification. For example, if something's off track and the reasons off track is they don't have keynotes and they need the board to help with keynotes or so forth, then at least that is highlighted so that we have an idea of what's going on and we
Okay.
can support there.
Yep, I'll work
but-
with the team for next month.
But aside from that, looks really good. And the narrative is good. It would be helpful to have that circulated earlier for review, but on the whole, yeah, very helpful for the upcoming incoming
Yep.
board.
And I apologize for that. I had scheduled because the board meeting was originally next Tuesday and then found out last week. So I got the team to hurry up, but you know, we're still striving to hit the Thursday before our board meetings. So I will also take a note as I close the books for the year on a preliminary basis. I will put a P&L in this and a note in the narrative about how each of the events did this year compared to the budget that we had, so the board can take a look at it. From a timing perspective, my hope is that we have 2021 completely closed by the end of March and turned over to the CPA so that they can work on the 990, with the hope that before Memorial Day, before the 31st of May, it's reviewed, it's approved, and it's submitted long before the November 15th deadline, because we're not auditing 2021, we will be auditing 2022 in 2023. So there's no reason to keep it going. So that's the estimated timeline going forward. And of course, I'll file the annual report in Delaware before March 1st for the organization. So without having any questions on the balance sheet, very quickly on the profit and loss statement. So looking at the year to date, while we are under budget at this point, and conference income, part of what's driving that is Australia Day, which we had budgeted but didn't happen. But as you can see, we're also very under budget in all of our expenses, so we were very conservative. The events, the expenses almost cover the shortage in revenue. And again, as we've said all year, the change in versus the budget for G&A has to do with the legal fees, and then Inspirity's fee, which this year in the budgeting we've captured. I got a note from them on what their prospective fees are for next year, so this shouldn't happen. And right now we are $84,000, almost $85,000 ahead in net income on an accrual basis over our budget. So with that, I'll take any questions on our profit and loss. Not hearing any. The other thing that I added in here, because I've had some more time to look at things that I think might be meaningful, is I put in a cash flow statement, which will show you all of our inflows and our outflows during the year for revenue and expenses, and does tie out to, now this is only for the US. It's a little bit of a challenge to try and combine it with Europe, but it does tie to the bank balance for the US only. So this will give you an idea of where we brought in money and where we spent money on a cash flow basis. The other thing that I'm working on, and I started it yesterday, I worked over the weekend on a very preliminary 2022 budget and showed it to Grant and Andrew in our bi-weekly meeting. I'm working on setting up, once the budget's approved, and hopefully we can present in January, we're going to start managing on a cash basis, which will be easier for the board to understand. As large as we are, and the fact that we don't have to worry about stock prices and shares and earnings, it will be a little easier for us to manage our cash that way. And what you will see every month going forward is I'll turn the budget into a cash forecast. So at the end of each month, I'll be able to report, not just in the narrative, but to show you all versus the budget where we are from an operating reserve perspective, which I think will help the board make better decisions as we move forward. So with that, that's the finances through the month of November. I'll take any questions on anything that I presented at this point. Okay, not hearing any, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to move to the regional chapter policy. We will get to the draft budget in 2022 once we've got the events for next year tied down a bit more. As I noted during my presentation, we only discovered that we really do need to run one additional event next year or two. We've got to nail that down to make sure that we get a profitable budget, if not one that doesn't make much money, but at least we don't lose money. So with that, what I'd like to do is hand it over to the regional chapter, or the regional chapter policy to the chapter committee so they can brief the board on what they found through the consultations. I have merged the proposal into a pull request. Whilst the board actually, while the chapter committee actually presents their findings, I'll share that in the chat. Spiros?
We seem to have lost Sam.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I'm here.
Or Sam, whoever. Sorry, I just jumped at the person I saw first.
He's the only one in the meeting, so.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Oh.
sure I saw Sam just a few minutes ago. I'm not sure what happened there.
I did too, but I suspected that might be Westeros'. Do you have something to present? You want to talk us through?
Yes, let me do both actually. I'm gonna send through the chat a spreadsheet that I do hope you all have access to. Can everybody open these, or like at least everybody who cares?
Opening it up. Yes, I have access to it.
Awesome, that's fantastic.
Oh,
So,
definitely.
But this is
yeah.
a DEFCON budget.
So
Spreadsheet,
sorry,
is that
I
correct?
got disconnected for a while. I got called by name, and that's what I was here to talk about. What was the context? Sorry, what was the context?
Okay, so it was actually going to be the regional chapter policy. Maybe Avi, we're on the chapter committee. You're familiar with it. I've posted the policy. What I'd suggest, Spiros, is
Yeah, I still am.
Technically, you still are, yes.
Yeah, I mean, board members can be part of the committees. They just cannot be leading it. But can I just confirm, Andrew, who was intended to be the speaker for the regional chapter policy?
Well, Sam, Avi, or Haral. I invited the entire leadership team, but Avi is here. Maybe
is
Avi.
here too.
Vlad's here as well. Fantastic. So, the chapter committee has consulted widely with the various regional chapters, and it'd be really good for the board to hear what they found. I have created a policy pull request. I will try to render it as a PDF while Avi describes what they found and what they're recommending.
All right. Yeah, I started actually putting together some slides, but I didn't actually get a chance to finish that. So I'll just walk you through it. So we actually spent quite a lot of time talking to a lot of regional chapters. It turns out there's more of them than we expected. Looking through the list, there's actually around over 30 last time I looked, regional chapters. Now, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the issue with regional chapters is that technically they don't exist. By policy, there was no mechanism to actually allow them to ever happen. They just kind of, came about. So the main thing we need to be doing is finding a model that works for the foundation and for the existing chapters, because as we said, there's a lot of them. So we talked to quite a few of them, and we found, we didn't talk to every single one of them, but we talked to a lot of them. And we found that almost every single chapter works differently. Every regional chapter works differently. And by that, I mean, what they define as a regional chapter is different. So we tried finding common denominators, and we had a few iterations and we bounced it off of them. And I think we got to something that works really well. We'll talk later with Andrew will have his own aspect as far as automating most of it. But as a model, as a concept, we realized, well, first of all, we had a few needs. We wanted to make it more manageable for OWASP. We wanted to reduce costs and whatnot. And for chapters, there's two issues. Besides the existing chapters, besides the existing regional chapters, we have issues with areas that can't support a city chapter, but they want to have something. So there might be adjacent locations that are not defined by city, but they kind of have a cohesive community. And you could see this in areas like Germany, even huge cities. It's still the same community as other cities, irrelevant of where you live. Same thing in Israel. The Tel Aviv security community is not separate from the Jerusalem or Haifa community, right? And we saw this concept repeat. So what we took is that one of the most important criterias is this concept of a cohesive community, which is kind of hard to formalize. But what we decided to do is that we're looking for consensus from a wider community. So if all of the leaders and all the activities and everything that happens in that chapter happens in a single city, it's kind of silly to call it a regional chapter. You can't call it after the country name. I'm trying to, I'll come up, I don't know, just gonna pick on somebody that doesn't exist. If all the activities happen in Rome, you can't call that the Italy chapter, right? Whereas if it's the other way around, if they're actually a single community doing activities all over the country, then that would make sense. So what we defined was that, first of all, the leaders need to be dispersed throughout that region, right? So whereas we define for city chapters, we required all leaders to actually reside in the same city. What we're requiring here is that they don't all live in the same city. So to create a regional chapter, first requirement is you need to have at least 3, and this is a change from a city chapter, you need to have at least 3 leaders to create the regional chapter, and they all need to live in distant cities. Distant, I don't mean like, 1,000 miles away, but, at least 50 miles away, or, whatever that definition is, in different cities to be able to consider that a region. We also wanted to reduce any kind of strife or conflict. So if a city chapter exists in that region, right? For example, let's say I want to make an Italy regional chapter, and there's an existing Rome chapter, then if they agree to that, it's like, okay, yeah, there's an Italian community, that makes sense. But in Rome, we're going to continue being a city chapter. Then the Rome city chapters, city chapter leaders would need to agree to that. So we're looking here to reduce any kind of conflict and have that consensus, right? Basically, we're defining it as not having any overlapping city chapter leaders that dissent from the existence of a new regional chapter. Okay. Obviously, if there's kind of a few different overlapping regions, think Canada versus Northwest Canada versus Quebec, we're going to be looking for the most minimal region that actually encompasses the whole set. And the idea is that the region actually needs to be a well-defined region. You can't just come up with north-south Ukraine, right? It has to be a sensible region that actually people that live there consider that as a region. It gets a little bit fuzzy here, right? And that's what we're looking to try and get out of the fuzziness. So that's the general idea. The other thing that we're adding here is the option for regional chapter to also have branches. They can have one or more branch under the regional chapter. a branch is not a full chapter. It's just kind of like a local delegate that, you know, goes off and does maybe a round table once or twice a year. Yeah, Martin?
I just raised my hand to wait for until you finish, so that I have some concerns. But one of this is in the past we said when you have a regional chapter, so you have to agree to create a city chapter. But I don't understand the solution when you already have a city, one or more city chapter in a region. Why do we still require? Why would it be a good idea to be able to create a region chapter where a city already falls in the same region? I think it's kind of that will be. Where it can get dirty, right?
It can.
Where we had in the past.
It can, but usually what will happen is if you'll have a wide ranging, a large region with one really big city, right? And that has a host of city chapter. And we saw this happen a few times. The city chapter does its own activities within the city, but everybody outside the city, they're still part of that region. They're still part of the community. They're not going to come into the city for the city activities. Right? But they still want to have some activities. They still want to have the meetups. They still want to have stuff happening, right? They still want to be part of an OWASP chapter. So, you know, so we considered a few different existing options, right? We looked at what actually exists. There are some overlaps, right? And there are some cases, for example, Japan, right? There is an OWASP Japan, and there's also an OWASP Tokyo. These run in parallel. So Tokyo does its own activities, has its own meetings inside Tokyo. OWASP Japan, it's a much wider region, but they also do shared activities that move around in different places. Oh, and that's the problem. We didn't actually get rid of regional chapters. We just didn't actually define them. So they still exist, but they were never defined by policy. They're never allowed in policy. And that's kind of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just can't remember, but it was one of the 4 years, but I kind of felt as if we decided that regional chapters wouldn't be possible anymore, that it would be city bound, so that you wouldn't have to, say for instance, if you had a region, I think it was, there was some issues in North America potentially. Is why we chose not to.
We're not approving them.
So Andrew has
is
going to provide some clarification there.
Yeah, so we're not approving them at the moment. That was the informal policy before we revised the chapter policy last year, but it's now in the existing chapter policy that we're not approving anymore. But the reality is that regional chapters are some of the oldest and largest and most active chapters, so we need to find a solution.
Okay. So, and is that the point that we're not going forward, we're not doing it anymore, but we're just trying to enable more kind of satellites within the regions? Is that?
No, we're trying to define them.
Yep. And to be clear, once we define them and there'll be an active policy, we will allow additional regional chapters to exist if they meet these requirements. And there are requirements above a city chapter. Now doesn't mean that we're creating a tiers of chapters. It's not like one chapter. The city chapter in that case is not part of the regional chapter. It's not like the Italy chapter owns the Rome chapter, right? They're completely independent. They're completely parallel. They just have additional requirements because they're actually taking the larger scope.
Yeah, and this is the area that I wanted to get a little bit better clarification on, because you've mentioned some examples there, and in actual fact, we did have some disputes that we needed to diffuse in various situations there. So this was unfortunately like an evolving situation. There are a couple of scenarios that we wanted to avoid. So the first one is, as you described, if there's an existing chapter and either a new regional chapter or an existing regional chapter, that the delineation and the setup, for lack of a better word, is done in such a way that it avoids any confusion, and it also avoids any conflict. The other example is the other way around. When there is a regional chapter, they may or may not be as active. A member of the foundation wants to now set up a chapter within the scope of that region and have sort of an autonomous team there, and essentially that they'd be able to work in tandem or carve out basically a chapter from that area, and at the same time do it in such a way that is harmonious. And I guess that is some of the areas that I'm not entirely sure how that works. So if you have a regional chapter and then someone sets up, okay, I want to set up a chapter in the capital, for example, would that mean that the regional chapter would not host events in that area unless sort of explicitly agreed with the new chapter leader for that city? That type of stuff needs to be ironed out. We don't have to solve it on this call, but it's those types of things, because the other challenge, and this is something that is part of the reason why this is built out, but not the exact purpose. The other challenge is if we have chapter leaders that may not necessarily be as active or engaging the community, it's kind of hard to create like a good process of basically transitioning or challenging that leadership in order to basically make that chapter or that area more productive
Would that be any
in
different
such a way
from
that is helpful. But that's part of the problem with the, and they're part of the reason of setting up regional versus city chapters. So they're two parts of the same coin, and that has to be sort of thought of.
So we actually addressed a lot of those issues, Sharif. I'm going to pull that up in a second, if you don't mind. I'll pull up Andrew's PDF in a second. I just want to ask you, as far as, you know, challenging and replacing leadership, do you think there's any difference between a chapter leader, city chapter leaders and regional chapter leaders? It's always a problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. The reason why I brought this up is, let's say that you have an inactive regional chapter, and as a result, the community there languishes. Then somebody wants to set up a city chapter, but does it in such a way that they know that they're not going to have any issues or disputes with that region that is above them going forward, and vice versa. If, for example, there is a city chapter that is not performing well and so on, and the community also needs to be supported, then somebody might consider, well, I live here, I'll set up a chapter myself. They also want to make sure that the regional chapter isn't going to say, no, this is our turf, or we've been hosting events here anyway, what are you doing? And so that type of discussions needs to be done in what would limit the tension and to diffuse the situation in such a way that it's collaborative rather than confrontational. But usually that's part of the reasons why they would do this, is they're either unhappy or there's some progress that needs to happen for the community, and that's where the divisions rise up.
I know that Martin and Grant have got their hands up, and I just want to point this out real quick. I do want the result of this is for Arby to take back these good suggestions and increase, like, work on that pull request that I've got to incorporate them. But I would like to be able to send out to the community a request for comments. But also, as it stands, this is not going to be possible with the automation and association management platforms we're looking at. So we do need to clarify some of these and simplify them, just simply to make sure it's not unworkable. But I'll just put it out there that automation has to be built into the policy. So there's a lot of stuff here that probably is politically good, but maybe belongs in the chapter handbook and not necessarily the policy.
Yeah, I just don't want the how to dictate the what. I know there might be some implementation challenges, but I don't want to say that there's an effective process that works, but we're not going to implement it because our tools won't give it. It's a huge part of it, though, because there's a lot of policies or decisions the board has done in the past that were not possible because of implementation. There's always have the conversation, but it's very important that the what leads the how, not the other way around. It should be obviously considered and figured out a little bit better, but I just want to make sure that we're not basically having a round peg fit a square hole, and we're trying to have one way lead the other.
So Martin?
Yeah, so first, Sharif, lower your hand now. Yeah, the thing is, you said several things. So I know it's always hard to make good policies, and I think what we want is to reduce complexity, not increase complexity. So for all, you said we have 30 regional chapters, so I would suggest, and I'm a chapter leader of our regional chapter too, to have them together to see because we have always the different geographical expectations or cultural expectations, and it's even the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany are close to each other. There are still 3 very different regional chapters. So I would expect or hope that we get the 30s together and have kind of a think tank what will happen. The other thing is I get your point for the regional chapter with a city chapter be there and the regional chapter can be in the same region. We had a lot of problems that in the past, that when you created for example, we had city chapters, many of them in India. Somebody created an OWASP India conference, and then everybody thought, I'm OWASP India. He was not even a chapter, but he thought that therefore he has to say over the city chapter. But definitely, there cannot be a difference just by policy between a chapter leader and a regional chapter leader, because the chapter leader is a chapter leader. Otherwise, we get so strange. So we have to simplify and clarify. And I would like to see that the context of a policy to be readable, the essence of in 10 lines max, because otherwise everything gets complex. We all work with policies. Nobody reads the really thick policies. Maybe Sharif does because it's his work, but nobody likes reading those, right? So you want to have to the point, what is it? And then for those who are hardcore, they can read the rest. But the chapter leaders, they will not want to be in politics. They want to lead a chapter. So keep them simple and please make this 1 page. What is this about? It should be not more than 10 lines because otherwise it gets too complex. Thanks.
So Martin, just real quick, could you give Avi sharing or co-host rights so he can share his screen? And Grant.
Yes, so just want to echo, I think, both what Sharif and Martin were trying to put through, and that is that this needs to be workable for the communities, because chapters are about community. I think that as a foundation, we should try to always choose smallest communities first. So if a city chapter wants to form and they can get the right people together to make that happen, that should be permissible. If there aren't enough people to form a city chapter, or if the city chapter is not able to help the community as a large, and therefore we need to allow for a bigger region to cover it, I think that's the scenarios that kind of Avi was talking about there. The thing that I do want to be careful about is that if you read that document that Avi's about to share, it does talk about something known as a branch, which does already sound like some kind of hierarchy. I would prefer that it was a regional chapter, covered that region. And the moment you have something that could form a branch, that becomes a carved out area, an independent chapter with chapter leaders who are responsible for that chapter. And the regional chapter just excludes that now newly formed chapter area. But probably, I haven't read the whole thing, so possibly Avi's about to say exactly that. So I'll give it back to you, Avi.
All right, so there's actually a few things I want to address. And the first one I actually want to address is probably at the end, is what Andrew said about the AMS. I agree, it absolutely needs to be automatable and workable. What it does not need to be, to my mind, is scalable. For the simple reason that regional chapters should already be considered kind of an exception in that, I mean, it doesn't need to be its whole committee approval process, take 6 months to do that. But the default chapter still should be a city chapter. That's the default. It's not like, a Chinese menu to order whatever you want, choose your options. No, you take a city chapter. If the city chapter model does not work for you, for whatever reason, and there's a few different possible scenarios, and we've seen several reasons why it would not work. As Grant said, maybe the city is not big enough, maybe the community does not actually fit this idea. So if a city chapter does not work, then we have the option of using a regional chapter as a solution for city chapters not working. And in order to do that, in order to avoid any kind of abuse or conflict and all these things. We did add on a few, hopefully not too complex requirements. Basically, just to see that you know, if you're claiming that you're a cohesive community outside the scope of a city, then that should actually be the case. Now, obviously, there's no formal checkbox that you can script that up, but we tried kind of proxying that by having leaders of the regional chapter in a few different places. Right. Martin, to address your concerns, if I remember all of them correctly, yes, we did not talk to every single regional chapter leader. We did send the document out. You may have missed that, and I'm sure not all the regional chapter leaders actually did see it, but many did. And we did, even some from your region as well. I'm not sure if your chapter specifically, but several in the Benelux area have responded as well, even though they're all different chapters per se, right? And we, you know, we adjusted as we went as well. Part of, right?
Just saying, it's all one region, Benelux, right?
Well, yeah, it's all one chapter, but that's the thing, right? Each region, as Martin said, there's a lot of cultural differences between each region, and you know, each one works differently, and that's part of the reason we did suggest including the idea of branch. And a branch is not like a smaller chapter. It's not a sub chapter. It's just we're a huge region, right? And you're not going to be able to get to every single location, village, hamlet, district within this huge region, hypothetically. So what do? OWASP, we recruit volunteers, right? And one volunteer will set up, let's say, a round table, or he'll order a table at a pub. And this is very much the German model, the Stammtisch, right? That's the round table. And a lot of remote cities, they'll have like one or two of these a year. Okay. I mean, you know, back when they could actually go sit in a pub. So the idea of the branch is just it's kind of like a satellite of the regional chapter. It's not its own thing. It doesn't even need to be in the AMS, to my mind. It's basically kind of a useful fiction, right? You don't want to be a full chapter leader. You can be a branch organizer. What does that entail? Order a table at a pub, set up a host to have a meeting, find 20 people like-minded that will come meet you once a year or twice a year. That's basically it. And the idea is that while we might not have a single city chapter meeting chapter activity requirements, when you look at the wider community, whether they're in, you know, distant locations or working remotely or working all together, the idea is that all together, this would actually support.
Which one is the back button, Daddy?
Sorry.
The idea is that all of this together is actually a functional, active, vibrant chapter, just not in one specific location. And that's the idea of branches. Again, they're not a requirement. They're not a sub chapter. They're a local representative of the regional chapter, because again, the regional chapter leaders might not be able to get to every single location. So they kind of delegate to a local person to set that up. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I think one thing that maybe we think of is, for lack of a better term, just to look at the threat model there, that the processes each one of them can't really be gained, because that's the spirit of the intent there. And once we have that, because it has to be fair, right? It can't be used in such a way that is can be interpreted differently, just to make sure that it's fair for each of the different cases, and it should be fine. But that's the main worry for me, and the main intent is to make it fair, but also make it workable for the different teams and the different scenarios there.
Absolutely. So you actually address the different scenarios here as well. Before I address that and go into that, see a few other hands up. I think actually Vandi had her hand up the longest.
Vandana?
You mute.
No. I think I'm good. You're actually answering all those questions. I was just going to add something to it, but you are taking on the stage. Avi.
Sorry for taking your words.
All right. It's good.
All right, Martin Grant.
Yeah, I think the point is what we want to solve is this policy. So what risk, what should we settle? What problems we had in the past? So please look, things we had in the past, look forward. So some of the city country chapters or regional, that we call them also country chapters, are the oldest we have. That's for Belgium, that's for the Netherlands. They're starting very early in the origin. And what we did in the past, I think, was not bad, because we said everybody is a country chapter, can remain a country chapter. We discouraged new regional or country chapter. The problem was when some people try to start a country chapter, like in Spain, I think it happened. People said, hey, I want to restart it, I don't want to create one. So the thing is, what we want to solve and why we want to solve it. I think that's very important to be very clear on that part, because you will not have a policy for all the possible ideas or reasons why. We will have a full comprehend document about that. So again, keep it high level, simple, and please focus on why we do that and how we do it. We want to enable, we want to disable, we want to enable our volunteers. Thanks.
So Avi, my hand is raised for a question more than anything else. So a branch is simply a representative of a chapter. So that would be one of the individuals, one of the leaders, one of the chapter leaders for that region. And already we allow for up to 5, I think, chapter leaders. So there's, I mean, as long as you can have those 5 branches, whether you call them branches or not, they're not going to be treated any differently. That branch, that chapter leader would be seen as a representative of that entire region, just like any chapter leader would be a representative of his chapter or his or her chapter. So I don't know that we need to make that a specific aspect of this, because it does make them deviate from how we otherwise see city chapters.
So one of the things I think branches both solve Germany, but one of the pieces of feedback is that we can't have an infinite number of folks with meetup accounts, and that was one of the driving forces. However, with the association management software, we could potentially avoid the meetup costs, and so the financial burden isn't the thing that's going to cause us problems. So realistically, branches will be, for all intents and purposes, the same as city chapters with an association management platform. And if we want simpler, I'd get rid of branches and just let Germany manage themselves as they see fit.
Well, so I would ideally either see Berlin as a full chapter on its own, with Germany as a regional chapter still existing, covering everything except Berlin. Then have Berlin be some kind of sub-chapter of Germany, because that doesn't make sense. Right. I think that's what Avi described.
Yeah, well, no, they're not a sub-chapter. They're just a local branch, right? The main problem with that grant, I mean, it's not just Berlin, it's also Munich and Frankfurt and a few other really large cities that on its own would probably be a large city chapter. The main problem with that is they really don't want to. And this is not just a question of, well, let's just force them to comply with policy. This will create massive friction, because this is a model that works. It makes sense for them. And going back to that underlying concept, right? It's a cohesive community. There's not a Berlin OWASP community. It's a Germany OWASP community. The folks from Berlin interact with the folks from Munich, interact with the folks from, I don't know, all the other little towns. About the leaders, so two changes we made here. First of all, we said, okay, a city chapter has to have a minimum of 2 leaders and up to 5 leaders are allowed. So with a regional chapter, we said, first of all, you need a minimum of 3, okay? And you can have even more than 5 regional chapter leaders, up to 7, if you have a lot of branches. So Germany, for example, I think they have something like 12 or 15 branches right now, or what would be branches, right? They could have up to 7 chapter leaders. Instead of, they can't have all 15, we cap it at 7, but we do expand it a little bit. Now, the issue is that, going back to the whole meetup and everything, a branch is not just a different kind of chapter. A branch is just part of the regional chapter. The reason, yes, we can get rid of it, but they all they also do kind of have their own local activities. So for example, just picking on Germany, even though there were another couple regional chapters with a similar model, they didn't call them Stammtisch, but a similar model. If Vlad is still on the call, maybe he remembers as well. Is that, sometimes they'll just have, 10 folks pull up a table in a bar, and that is their activity, and that meets our requirements for an activity and a meeting. They'll talk AppSec and then maybe have a couple of sessions around that. And that is, so they need a way to be able to differentiate different locations. So we don't need to call it a branch, we could call it a location. They're not managing their own expenses, right? And if there's a branch organizer who is not a chapter leader, for example, in Germany, there's 15, so there's going to be a bunch of them that are not chapter leaders. They can't submit for expenses, and you know what? They don't want to. All they want to do is, order that table in the bar, in the pub, and call up the folks, and everybody meets there. So this actually helps us manage that balance between a very wide region versus I want to find an event in my city, right? And if there's the Germany chapter, how do I know when there's an event in my city, right? So it's kind of a balance, and this is why I said it's kind of a useful fiction.
And that's what I meant with, sorry for not raising my hand. So that's what I meant by don't overcomplicate it. In Germany, it works as they do it with Stammtisch, but it's a very typical German thing. And they're happy with it because they don't want to have a chapter overhead, just want to be happy to do it. And do we need rules for that? I don't know. If we have to officially declare branches, because a city, it's a huge city, can also have then suddenly branches, because we have a New York, it became New York Metro and Brooklyn. So I don't know if it makes sense, because what we want to do is to enable our volunteers to make chapter meetings. That's what we care about, to reach out to people gathering together and talk about ours, of doing our things. And do we need them to go to that detail to say, okay, when you are a regional chapter, you can, it's overcomplicating, it's not helping. So they always keep thinking what you're trying to help, is this a problem? And if it's not a problem yet, don't try to figure out all the problems that may appear. Just try to solve the problems, because a policy, it's not cast in stone, definitely not these days. It's a living document that has to reflect our community and our culture in general. So problems that can arise can be addressed later on. Don't try to overthink all the problems there may be.
So
thanks.
Absolutely agree with that. And to be clear, we're not trying to create to solve additional problems, but these are actual problems that we found to be able to put this existing chapter into any kind of formal policy. And it's not just Germany, by the way. So just for the record, they're the big one, but there's a couple of smaller issues like that in Latin America as well, and a few other places. And I want to be clear that branches are completely optional. So, they don't, if you don't need them, they don't complicate you because they're not an issue. There's a few other things I want to address about branches as well, but Grant, go ahead.
So let's say, and I don't know the actual layout of the Germany chapters, but it's been a useful stalking horse for so long. So let's say there is a branch in Hamburg. They're very far from the rest of the branches in the rest of Germany, and they'd like to meet more regularly. But for some reason, they either feel like they're taking over what seems to be the norm from the rest of Germany. So they decide they want to form a city chapter Hamburg. Would this new policy allow them to form Hamburg as a city chapter and fall outside of the regional chapter?
We explicitly have a section for that in the policy, as I'm showing on my screen right now. There's a section creating a new city chapter within the region of an overlapping regional chapter.
Okay.
The bottom line is a regional chapter cannot stop a city chapter from existing, and there's no hierarchy there.
Okay.
It just says, okay, it feels like, well, it feels like they're bigger and more senior. That's not the case. That exists sometimes between city chapters as well. But formally, policy-wise, and everything-wise, there is no hierarchy between the chapters. Does that make sense, Grant?
Yep, it does. Thanks, Avi.
Yeah, so what you say now, for regional chapter, is not actually a problem we only had with regional chapters. it's no problem we have city chapters, because when it's a city chapter, how far it's apart. We had it, for example, we have New York, what is one city, we have 7 chapters, and we had one chapter actually meeting in a physical territory the other chapter claims as his territory. So then you get this problem. So I think this, when you come, what is the border of a region? The city is also a region, right? And we had it also in India, where one city chapter has been founded, and actually it's like, Vandana, of course, knows better than me. It's like Delhi. It's more than one city, right? It's so huge, and so there was a city, and actually, yes, it's a city, but it's actually part under the curse of Delhi. You get that problem. So try to be careful with the naming when it's a regional chapter, because in essence, a city chapter is also a regional chapter. So talk about chapters, and maybe not. We should not name them city chapters and regional chapters, but then should have one complex about chapters. Again, trying to keep it really simple and not overcomplicated. Thanks. Lisa is also.
I understand the approach, but the policy right now defines that chapter should be named after the cities, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to find, and for good reason. It's not just about the name, but right, but there's good reason, and we're trying to find a solution for, again, where that model does not work. You know, that falls down in certain cases. Trying to be able to find that. You know, whether we want to define them as a different kind of chapter, that's a good question. So Lisa had her hand.
Yeah, when I was talking about hierarchical, Avi, I meant that if there was like OWASP Japan, there was fear of not opening a local city chapter because there was an OWASP Japan, and it was the newer opening of chapters that I dealt with people that had that hierarchy perception, not particularly the leaders of the country chapters that are already in formation. So you spoke with the chapters that are already in formation. I spoke individuals that were looking to possibly open other chapters in that area, but there was a country chapter presence already. So there's a difference in the background as far as the detail of where you were coming from and where I was coming from the hierarchical perception.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. That's absolutely correct. We actually did talk to a few potential leaders of chapters under a city chapters under a country chapter. And you're right. There is room for a perception. I would even call it a misperception of that in this case. And we're trying to handle that. But in this case, we do have 2 options, right? Number one, yes, they can still create a city chapter without any kind of overlap with you know, geographic overlap, but no control or overlap or constraint around that. On the other hand, perhaps they'd like to, you know, they're not fully served by the regional chapter, but they can't really, they're not comfortable creating their own city chapter. And that's exactly where this feeling of a branch comes in. It's to meet that feel of, I want to be part of the regional chapter, not my own city chapter, can't create my own city chapter, but I'm not fully served. Great. So serve yourself, basically, set it up and we'll support you.
Yeah, it just seems like the initiative was, as we've come a whole year through, is trying to conform or get some kind of policy or some guidelines around what's currently out there, because everybody does it differently. And some people have meetups, some people don't. I mean, so it seems like we're trying to get some foundation for those chapters, but moving forward, I haven't had any requests for a regional or a country chapter. It's been city chapter setups. It's just those that are out there that we have no guidelines around.
First of all, that's fantastic to hear, by the way. Andrew and a few others have said, well, as soon as we allow it, there's going to be a lot of them. It could be that we haven't had till now because we're very explicitly saying we're not allowing it. It could be that as soon as we say it's allowed, there'll be a lot, but there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be a lot. That's kind of the point. And I think you're very right about that, Lisa. There's not supposed to be a lot, but there are, and there will be additional places where the existing city chapter model simply doesn't work for, you know, various reasons. And that's what we're trying to, not just to shoehorn the policy into existing chapters or existing chapters into the existing policy, but trying to find a flexible enough model that works.
Oh, I think they don't have a choice for another option. But
Right.
if we give them choices, there is going to be people that we're going to have requests.
I'm sure. And you know what? Many of them won't be valid. Many of them won't make sense, whether it's because of overlap, because of conflict, because it's not really a region, right? As Martin said, I want to create the EU region. No, that doesn't make sense as a regional chapter, right?
Yeah, but that's putting a lot of work on the chapter committee.
How to define what makes sense and not, that's really hard, believe me. I think Sheriff is raising his hand.
Yes.
Yeah, there is something that you brought up, so a thought came to mind, which is if we actually get this done well and it works harmoniously, and I was just thinking as a London chapter leader, I wouldn't necessarily mind having a UK regional chapter, especially if, for example, we can all pool our resources, Bristol, Manchester, and others to basically set up a UK event, a regional event that makes some sense for us to collaborate. But as long as it's sort of proven and works out, you might be surprised and it might evolve. We can never really tell what the future brings. But for right now, I think, yes, I think the spirit of the intent right now, it's for specific regions that may not have like a large enough community, and the community spread out in so many different places that you want a group, a leadership group that can basically travel from place to place and able to support there. As it matures, you might end up in a situation where it serves other purposes. But I think it's the matter of the intent and making sure that it works harmoniously will show us how it evolves.
Thanks, Sharif. I do want to jump in one really important thing. You don't need to create a UK regional chapter or even an England regional chapter in order to have shared events.
Yeah.
According to the events policy, they're not associated directly with the specific chapters. So you could already do that today. You could have done that last month as well. You don't need to be a regional chapter, and that's very explicitly not the purpose to have this one conference.
Yeah,
Example,
yeah, I mean, it's closer collaboration, let's put it that way, for whatever intents and purposes that we want.
Look at the Benelux Day. We organize an annual conference together with Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg for many years now.
Yeah, I think we're rabbit holing specifically on events, but what I meant was like if we wanted to collaborate on larger activities, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, and we want to have something that might evolve that way, but fundraising events or anything like that, then we might do that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's see what it evolves to, but looking forward to getting this right. Sorry, I don't like silence. So that was basically my point there.
All right. I'm sure there were other questions asked that I missed and I didn't respond to. Did anybody have a question that I didn't respond to, or any other questions?
So the reality is that one of the guidelines that I'd like to work with the chapter committee on is that, and I put it in the text above, is essentially saying that the chapter committee and the foundation are in the business of exceptions and approvals, not necessarily the business of operations, because if we specify who does something, they have to do it. And putting volunteers to work on an operational pathway, I don't think is going to work. And also I want to make sure that my staff are available to do more important things than something that could be automated. So there's that element of it as well. From the regional chapter point of view, are you looking for, I need to know this for the approvals process, are you looking to approve them or post-approve them? Like, could someone just put them in place and then we let you know there's a new regional chapter and you can say yes or no? Or is it one of those things where they need to put a ticket in, and if they are successful, then they could actually put in a new chapter, a regional chapter application into the AMS?
I'm not 100% comfortable speaking for the chapters committee, as by the time this happens, I won't operationally being the one doing it. The way we were thinking about this, and we discussed this a few times, and we actually went back and forth on this, and we kind of, in my mind, and Vlad, please jump in if you have any input here, Sam, if you came back or not, is that regional chapters are already an exception. So at this point, we do want to have a pre-approval there, just so that nobody comes in and says they want to create the EU chapter or regional chapter, right? Okay. Because there's no real way to automate that, because you could call it anything, right? You're not going to put a list of regions. It's not just countries, right? We had one, Patagonia. I don't know how many folks are familiar with Patagonia. It's actually defined as approximately the southern third of South America, both in Argentina and in Chile.
Wow.
Right, approximately 1/3. My uncle was just there, actually. It's a beautiful region. Unfortunately, they closed down. But that's the idea of a regional chapter that's not at all associated with country borders. And they did activities, you know, across both borders. So that's the idea of, you know, what is a region? It's not necessarily a country. It could be less than a country, it could be more than a country. Hypothetically, you know, if Benelux wanted to be a region, that's cross-country, right? They don't need to be, but the idea is that the regional chapter is not, can we do a regional chapter, but do we need it for us because city chapter doesn't work?
I think that's a scary one. When you said do we need a regional chapter because city chapter doesn't work, then you get a kind of a slippery road there on this phrasing. Yeah, I can imagine so many things, because then you have indeed somebody says the city chapter doesn't work well, so I make a regional chapter, and then you get this hierarchy thing again, what you just try to avoid. I think on the hierarchy, that's always an assumption that a country is higher than a region, chapters in is higher than a city. But yeah, I think there's so much. Yeah.
Why would there be a hierarchy just because the city chapter doesn't work for us?
No, I think there will always be a hierarchy assumption by people. When I talk about the moment a city of one region, it's within a bigger region, there will always be the assumption of a hierarchy. Always will be. I think that's just in the, that's my expectations as not a certainty. Yeah, he says it's psychology. Oh, I cannot pronounce the word now.
Psychological.
Yeah, in English it's just sorry. So that always might be, but when you say it's created, so I create a region chapter because city chapter doesn't work, then it's the question, who judges that it doesn't work? And we had this competitive thing, so then you get a slippery road by it doesn't work. We had also had that people create a city chapter, they try to do another city chapter because those was trying to defend and trying to be holding on this chapter leader rights when when the person in question didn't do anything. So I think generally it's a more complex thing. Definitely, when you look back too many years in history of OWASP, the dark side of OWASP, if I may say so. But I think yes, let's focus on the bright side of OWASP and let's see how we can enable them to make this heaven space required. Yeah.
I just want to clarify one thing, Martin, because I think I was unclear. I don't mean the situation where, well, this city chapter isn't working for us, so we need to create a competing regional chapter. No, I meant the idea of a city chapter doesn't fit in our community. And that's really what it comes down to, the idea of the boundaries of the community.
I just meant that's therefore be careful with wording.
Yes, I agree with that, accept it. I see Vlad was waiting to answer.
Just wanted to note that just based on the measurement of the amount of effort required to chase inactive chapters and somehow motivate them to become active again, it's much better to have them pre-approved.
It's referring to my thing, who it's touching, yes. But okay, thanks.
Thanks, Vlad. Sharif?
No, I echo the same sentiment, and sometimes you end up with chapters who are inactive, then notified, then kicked out, and then at the last minute try to set up some events and so on, which is fine, but sometimes if you actually ended up with someone who's more motivated to take on, that would have probably been a better answer.
So that does bring up the issue of inactive chapters. We've had an issue where some of the people we reactivated are coming back for a second or a third go. We need to have a circuit breaker built into that process. And I would like to work with the chapter committee when we're doing this regional chapter policy to simplify and take into account the fact that we can't just have the merry-go-round continue. Lisa wrote some bullet points in her staff thing, but essentially we need to make sure that people who come to the chapter committee saying, yes, I'd really like to reopen my chapter, they come together with an activity plan or something that says, this is how we're going to do it. And then if they don't achieve it, there needs to be a sit-out period. Otherwise, we're just going to, it's so much work for the chapter committee. It's so much work for the staff because it's very manual. And there needs to be a circuit breaker that says it can't continue forever.
But then I still, again, kind of conscious because again, we want to enable. When you say, okay, you want to do the chapter, come with an activity plan. It's like you just said you want to re-engage, I just want to do something. And now I have to make a plan and a document that is not helping, that's overcomplicating, right? So we have to say maybe here is things we have, a package like we had a plan for conference in a box, like this is how some chapters work, but we also had in the past, and I don't know if it exists anymore, when there's a new chapter, then share with them the links to other research chapters around them, what we did in the past. What really helps, for example, Luxembourg is we started, and he was directed to Saber and myself to do something together and help him. But don't let them draft a activity plan, because then it will frustrate and you. Somebody says, I want to organize something, don't overcomplicate it. Please.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to do admin in their spare time. They're trying to either set up a fun event or do something for the community rather than turn it more bigger.
Well, if we're not going to do an activity plan, we're just going to have to be hard and fast and say, if you don't succeed reactivation, you just have to sit out for a period of time. That way there's no activity plan.
Martin, I want to point out, I think one point is getting missed. This is not for new chapters. This is for a chapter that was already existing, inactive, deactivated, and now they want to reactivate it. They already went through a whole year of not being active, so they need to prove, at least set up the first meeting. This is the problem that Lisa went through, but she reactivated chapters, and 6 months later or 2 years later, we're right back where we started. So,
but that's the thing. Is it the same people? Is it the new people? Somebody just maybe hasn't been active for a while. For last year, I have not been active a lot, as you all know, for several reasons. And we did just barely minimum, but we did. And then I said, when somebody says, I want to reactivate, you know the requirements, and then you can say, okay, let's prove us the next half year. But the name, so activity plan sounds like overhead. So I said, okay, good, go for it. And then give them like a probation time, and they already did like what for 3 months, but don't make it a plan, don't make it a policy or you know what I mean?
But they already did that. We're talking about situations where they already did that. And we're right back where we started. So the idea is, no, you don't need to make a Gantt chart. I mean, nobody does that, right? It's set up the first meeting, right? And how are you going to have the next meetings? So we're calling it a reactivation plan because they need to show that they're actually going to be able to be committed. And, there's reasons, okay, maybe you weren't able to do it last year, fine. But, let's discuss that and see how you're not going to be in the same situation you were before. Don't forget, there's supposed to be at least 2 leaders for a chapter, right?
Yeah. I think we are closing into the time of the meeting, and Tom is already leaving. So I want to say goodbye and happy holidays to Tom as well, and get into the new year as well.
Same.
Yeah, so Avi, I wanted to just make sure, have you covered all the items that you wanted to address or discuss for this regional chapter policy?
Overall, generally, yes. We did mention that there is consideration here to this conflict for overlap, right? What happens if there's you want to open a regional chapter where a city chapter exists? Well, if the city chapter doesn't agree, then that doesn't make sense to have regional chapter, right?
Yeah.
And as Andrew said, we need to emphasize that it's not a hierarchy. You're in parallel, right? You can work together, or you could not work together. You can be completely independent. That's fine. And if you want to create a new city chapter under a regional chapter, the regional chapter cannot block the city chapter from being created. Again, you're not the boss of them. All right. And we do cover the situations where, just like as was said, if your city chapter exists and you want to create a new city chapter in the same city, you can, right? So there is some of that as well. Taking the Israeli chapter, right? Probably half of our leaders exist in the vicinity of Tel Aviv. It doesn't make sense for somebody to come and now create a Tel Aviv chapter, right? It would make sense to create, I don't know, Beersheba or Eilat chapter, but not Tel Aviv. And actually the branches work really well that. So we discussed the branches. One thing we didn't discuss was the additional activity requirements that for regional chapter, you're kind of outside the city chapter. So we're actually going to require, instead of just 3 activities per year, we're going to require either 6 activities per year, including all the branches, because that's the point. You're a larger region, you have a lot more people, you should be able to host more, and that's the point of the branches. And you'll include branch activities as part of the 6. Or do 3 activities as per the minimum, plus a larger event like an AppSec Days, a conference type of thing. Right? Again, we're trying to find a model that fits different regions, different cultures, different requirements. So that's the overall. Yeah, Martin.
So I have 2 things. One again, please, I would like to see then have town hall meetings about that with your committee. And also because you already mentioned several times that there were cases of the one or the other. I also would like to see, Andrew, that we maybe more than once a year, twice a year at least, have a executive meeting with the chapter committee about issues that are going on, so that we have more insight. And I want to have executive because it should be in trust and in confidence about what's going on with the chapters for the board to be updated.
Would you like me to repeat that for the other committees as well?
I think that communities, if we have a project committee, it's like those high profile and important for our committees. Yes, I think maybe for all of them it would be very useful. Okay. Otherwise, it's not a committee, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'll organize that and spread it out. If you want 2, that's good, because we have 6, and we can have like 1 a month.
Perfect. No more committees.
We need an events committee.
No, we got Kelly.
You call Kelly a committee?
But we want to keep Kelly, Grant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharif.
I just have a great deal of faith in Kelly at the moment. She's just done really well this year. I'm pretty impressed.
Yes, again, we want to keep her well and in good health.
Yes.
Okay, so for the chapter committee, I'll touch base with you on the public mailing list about how we get this to a place. It sounds like Martin's asked for a town hall. We can get that scheduled in January, which obviously means we're not going to get through the community review process before the February board meeting. But for the board, just no vote, just an indication. Do you think this is well developed enough that we could start the community review process, even an extended one, to go to the February board meeting with this, with a town hall in January?
Yeah.
I'm seeing nods. Okay, cool. Thank you so much to the chapter committee for doing this. It's really hard because there are just almost every regional chapter is different to the others, and finding a single model was going to be very difficult no matter what. So I do appreciate their work in this. And with that, Sharif, would you like to do the honors of closing the meeting?
Before we close the meeting, I think everybody wants to say goodbye and thank you all for Sharif. And should we have a drum ruffle for you closing your last official meeting as... No, sorry.
Well, I don't think you guys are getting away that easy. So, first of all, let me double check. Is Spiro still on the call?
He is.
Yes. So
Looks like-
Spiro, you did have a item that you wanted to cover, and I don't know, Andrew, was that part of the agenda, the DEF CON budget?
No, we absolutely do need a sponsor to bring that because it'll be a vote.
So
okay.
So
Sorry.
I've reached out to Spiros I'll chat to him offline. I'll make sure that we bring it to the next board meeting, and I will sponsor it and make sure that we've got everything aligned there. Because I think I
Okay,
can help
thank you.
us with some of those numbers.
Okay, thank you. And then just to make sure that there are everything else house in order, I wanted to just check in. So are all the existing and the new board members for 2022 that you've done the paperwork, your membership is in order, and also that you're going to take the board source training as well, that you have access to it and so on. If you have any questions, make sure, feel free to reach out or speak up soon if you have any questions, just to make sure that we don't end up with any issues down the line or anything that impacts sort of your eligibility to vote or anything else.
I assumed you signed all the paperwork as well, Sharif, so you should know.
Yeah.
We've all signed it.
Which is why I'm asking. Like, oh yeah. Hey,
It's
Martin.
not signed. It's not signed by all chapter leaders, because when you're a chapter leader for many years, they actually didn't have this new chapter leader requirement, and it's a problem because you cannot make them to go back in time. Yeah.
This is for the
Interesting one.
incoming board, but yeah. Okay, with that out the way, yes, we'll be ending the board meeting. As a personal thank you as well for everyone. It's been an absolute honor to work alongside all of you and to be able to contribute to the community, and learned quite a lot. And thank you also for Owen. We've made it, the two of us, at the same term, and managed to end as well, all the way to the 4 years. And thank you for your friendship and your contributions as well, Owen, and for translating for Martin for all these years. That's been super helpful.
I've passed
I
that on.
outlived you guys, right?
Sorry?
I outlived you both on the board.
Yeah, there was a typo in your membership or your board tenure, I guess. Martin is now going to be the longest of the new tenures, I guess, because he's going to have what, 5 years, I guess, when he finishes.
Yeah.
So even though it says that you're not allowed to do that.
It's your fault.
I'm only joking. But yeah, Grant, you're taking over the translation duties, are you?
For as long as I can, yes.
Good luck. I have a little black book of Martin's sayings and stuff like that. If you want, I'll send it over to you.
Please do. I fully intended to pick it up in Dublin, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen. So maybe I'll have to make that a private trip.
Yeah. Although everything's now closed at 8 o'clock every night.
It's okay. We can get drunk before 8.
Yeah. Yes. Pubs open at 12, so still plenty of time.
Very good. Who was the second on the adjournment? Sorry.
I'll second it for the last time.
Yeah, I haven't even said, but yeah,
Okay.
motion to adjourn the board meeting. Thank you for all for seconding it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sharif and Owen. It was amazing to work with both of you.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot.
A lot of slagging, Martin. That's both a translator and his slagger. So I always make fun of him. So
Do I get that job too?
if feel free, or if somebody wants to fight for it, anybody. Glenn, I know you. You're probably used to it.
Yeah, I also have a black book like you, so yeah.
Glenn is tiny. He doesn't dare.
Oh, so what Martin was saying, he was intimidated.
Yeah, I'm tiny, but
It's not recorded,
big.
right?
The book is big that I have. No.
Okay. We can stop the recording. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
everyone.
Happy holidays.